On a tape from a trading floor in Houston, a group of men are laughing. They're laughing about an old woman. They call her Grandma Millie, their nickname for every ordinary Californian, and how she's paying $250 for electricity that should have cost $30. We're stealing from California, one of them says, and then they laugh again. It's the summer of 2000, half a continent away. California is going dark, rolling blackouts, hospitals on backup power, a state of emergency, and the men who caused it are on tape, celebrating. This is the story of how Enron almost destroyed California, not with a hostile takeover, not with a political coup, but by turning the state's own power grid into a weapon. California had done something no other state dared to try. It deregulated its electricity market. The goal was lower prices, competition, a free market utopia. The result was a kill zone, and standing at the perimeter, watching, waiting, was a company that understood the architecture of the trap better than the people who built it, Enron. This is not a story about accounting fraud. That came later. This is a story about what happens when an empire mistakes a state for a target. Here's the part of the story most people forget. The crisis wasn't an accident. California's deregulation was a blueprint, and that blueprint had a fatal flaw engineered directly into the foundation. The state forced utilities to sell their power plants. PG&E, Southern California Edison, ordered to divest. Then they were ordered to buy electricity on a brand new wholesale spot market. Every day, whatever the price. But here's the trap. The utilities were capped on what they could charge consumers. The wholesalers, the Enrons of the world, had no caps at all. Sell low, buy high, no limits. It was like locking the front door and leaving the vault open with a map to the combination. California built the cage. Enron just had to walk in. In the year 2000, Enron was untouchable. America's most innovative company, 6 years running. Fortune's cover, a stock price that seemed to defy gravity, 20,000 employees, $100 billion in revenue projected. Jeffrey Skilling ran the show, Harvard MBA, McKinsey pedigree. He believed markets could solve everything. He believed intelligence was the ultimate weapon, and he built a culture that agreed with him. At Enron, you weren't hired. You were recruited, tested, hazed. Only the smartest survived. They called themselves the best and brightest. What they didn't say out loud was the second half of the sentence, the best and brightest, and completely unaccountable. The real power sat one floor below the executive suite, the trading floor, where a group of men in their 20s and 30s controlled more energy flow than most governments. This is where it gets surgical. The traders didn't just respond to the market, they engineered it. They had names for their strategies, names that read like a classified weapons inventory. Death Star. Enron schedules power into California on one transmission line and the exact same amount flowing out on another. Two opposite flows, zero net power, but both lines look congested. California pays congestion fees on phantom traffic. Enron collects on nothing. Fat boy. Overschedule demand. Make grid operators believe consumption is far higher than reality. Prices spike. Enron profits. Get Shorty. Sell power. California didn't need, at crisis prices, buy it back cheap, resell it at the peak. Ricochet, ping pong, wheel out. These weren't market strategies. These were weapons. And California had no defense. At least, not yet. Because everything California failed to defend against was about to arrive all at once in a single brutal summer. Summer 2000. A heat wave hits the West Coast. Temperatures climb past 100. Air conditioners across the state switch on. Demand surges. In a normal market, supply rises to meet it. But Enron wasn't in a normal market. Enron was running the Death Star. Fat boy. Get Shorty. They didn't increase supply. They cut it. Power plants that should have been running went offline, scheduled for maintenance that was never needed. Transmission lines showed congestion that didn't exist. Electricity California had paid for was sold out of state, then sold back at triple the price. Wholesale prices didn't just rise, they detonated. 800% increase in 4 months, June 14, 2000. The Bay Area goes dark, 97,000 customers, the first rolling blackouts in California history. It wasn't a shortage, it was a demonstration. But the demonstration isn't what would end them. What ended them was what they said out loud, on tape, while it was happening. And you're about to hear it. This is the moment the mask came off, January 2001. The crisis is in full swing. California is bleeding, blackouts, bankruptcies, and in Houston, on Enron's trading floor, they're laughing. The tapes. We're stealing from California. Yeah, Grandma Millie, man. She's the one who's paying $250 a megawatt hour. They're not whispering. They're not hiding. They're celebrating. One trader describes taking a power plant offline during peak demand deliberately to drive prices higher. He calls it the best money you could ever make. Another call. Traders laughing about how much they've taken from California that day. $1 million, maybe more. Not stolen from a competitor, not extracted from a rival corporation, taken from hospitals, from nursing homes, from people whose air conditioning just stopped during the hottest summer in decades. They knew exactly what they were doing. They just didn't think anyone would ever hear. January 17th, 2001. Governor Gray Davis declares a state of emergency. The California Independent System Operator issues a Stage 3 alert. Highest level. Means there isn't enough power to keep the lights on. Rolling blackouts begin. Hundreds of thousands of homes. Businesses shuttered mid-transaction. Traffic lights dead. Elevators stop between floors. Hospitals switching to backup generators. Praying the fuel holds. 2 days in a row. January 17th, January 18th, then March, the worst one. March 19th and 20. 1.5 million people in the dark. The state was being extorted in real time, and the extortionists weren't in some foreign adversary's command center. They were in a glass tower in Houston, Texas. $45 billion. That's the estimated total damage. Not to Enron's competitors, to California, its economy, its people, and Enron's stock price, record highs. But the empire that looked untouchable had already begun to crack, and the first crack came from inside Enron's own walls. August 14th, 2001. Jeffrey Skilling resigns 6 months after the peak of the California crisis, 6 months after the trader tapes, 6 months of record profits. He says it's for personal reasons. The market buys it, the stock barely moves, but inside Enron, something is breaking. Sharon Watkins, a vice president, writes a memo to Ken Lay. She calls the company's accounting practices an elaborate hoax. She warns that Enron will implode in a wave of accounting scandals. Lay reads the memo. He hires a law firm to investigate, but he doesn't stop the trading. He doesn't stop the schemes. He doesn't tell the board. October 2001. Enron announces a quarterly loss, $618 million. Then it restates 5 years of earnings, erases nearly $600 million in profits that never existed. The market notices. The stock starts falling. The smartest guys in the room had built a house of cards so elaborate they forgot they were living inside it. December 2nd, 2001. Enron Corporation files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, $23 billion in assets, $63 billion in liabilities, the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history at that point, a record. 20,000 employees lose their jobs. Their 401k plans, built on Enron stock, evaporate overnight. Retirement accounts gone. $40 billion of shareholder value, gone. The stock that traded at $90 a share less than a year earlier closes at 61 cents. But here's what most histories miss. The California manipulation and the accounting fraud weren't two separate scandals. They were the same scandal, the same culture, the same arrogance, the same belief that intelligence exempted them from consequence. Enron didn't just manipulate California's grid and then collapse from accounting fraud. The manipulation was the culture, and the culture destroyed everything it touched. May 2002, internal Enron memos leaked to the public. The schemes have names now: Death Star, Fat Boy, Get Shorty, Ricochet, Ping Pong. The playbook is laid bare. Every tactic, every manipulation, every dollar extracted from a state that didn't know it was under attack. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission launches an investigation. The memos are the smoking gun, and then the tapes surface, the trader recordings, the laughter. Grandma Millie. The casual discussion of stealing more than $1 million a day. The recordings are played on the news. In congressional hearings, there is no defense, no spin, no PR strategy that survives audio of your employees laughing about taking money from elderly people during a blackout. Enron had already collapsed, but this was the moment America understood why it needed to. The aftermath: $40 to $45 billion in economic damage to California, PG&E files for bankruptcy, the largest utility bankruptcy in U.S. history. Governor Gray Davis is recalled. The energy crisis becomes the weapon his opponents use to remove him. The FERC investigation confirms systematic market manipulation. Enron agrees to pay $1.5 billion in settlements, a fraction of the damage. Ken Lay and Jeffrey Skilling are indicted. 2006. A Houston jury convicts Skilling on 19 counts of conspiracy, fraud, and insider trading. Lay is convicted on 10 counts. Lay dies of a heart attack before sentencing. His convictions are vacated. Skilling serves 12 years. The traders who laughed on the tapes, most were never charged with crimes. The schemes they ran, Death Star, Fat Boy, Get Shorty, were so novel that in many cases there were no laws explicitly prohibiting them. They hadn't broken the rules. They had redesigned the battlefield so the rules didn't apply, because no one had imagined a corporation would try. The lesson isn't that Enron was evil. The lesson isn't even that deregulation failed. The lesson is this: California built a system with a fatal flaw and trusted that no one would exploit it. Enron treated that flaw not as a vulnerability to be reported, but as a weapon to be deployed. One side assumed good faith. The other saw only opportunity. That's the asymmetry. That's the kill shot. It sounds like a story from another era, another century, something that could never happen today. But every system has a flaw. Every market has an exploit. Every platform has a vulnerability that someone, somewhere, is already mapping. The only difference between 2001 and now is whether you're the one designing the defenses or standing in the dark, wondering who turned out the lights. Enron taught the world a lesson it didn't want to learn. Not about energy, not about markets, about power. Real power doesn't break the rules, it rewrites them. And the people who rewrite them don't ask permission. They wait for you to look away. The only real question is, which one are you going to be? And if you want more insane stories about business and history, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You don't want to miss our next video. Thanks for watching.